From the very beginning of the Amazing Digital Circus, abstraction has been framed as the ultimate horror, something worse than being trapped, something irreversible. Every time the word is mentioned, the tone shifts, the music darkens, and the characters react with genuine fear. And for a long time, the audience accepted that framing without question. Abstraction was treated as the digital equivalent of death, the complete erasure of a character who simply couldn't handle the pressure anymore. But as the series has gone on, especially with the latest episode, that explanation has started to feel incomplete. There are too many inconsistencies, too many strange visual choices, and too many hints buried in Jax's storyline for abstraction to be something as simple as, "You stressed out too much and disappeared." Early on, we were led to believe abstraction only happens when someone becomes obsessed with escaping instead of adapting, when the weight of the circus becomes unbearable. Characters like Kaufmo were presented as warnings, examples of what happens when hope turns into fixation. We even saw near-abstractions teased before, like Gangle nearly breaking down during her job, or Jax himself spiraling during moments of panic. But what stands out now is that Jax's case doesn't follow the same pattern. His near-abstraction doesn't feel like a mental collapse. It feels deliberate, slow, and almost inviting. In the beach episode, when everyone else is distracted by Kane's forced fun, Jax withdraws. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't spiral publicly. He goes back to his room, to darkness, to isolation. And that's where everything changes. The scene that follows isn't chaotic or violent like previous abstractions were implied to be. Instead, it's quiet, personal. Jax sees a hole in the wall, something that shouldn't exist in a perfectly controlled digital environment. When he reaches out, he doesn't meet static or corruption. He meets a hand, Ribbit's hand, someone who already abstracted, someone who, according to the old rules, should be gone forever. That alone raises a huge question. If abstraction is total deletion, why is Ribbit still there in any form at all? And why is he reaching back? The moment their hands touch, Jax doesn't scream or glitch out. He's pulled into light, bright, overwhelming, almost peaceful light. What follows looks nothing like system failure. He moves through a vast, dream-like space that feels less like a game and more like a transition. Even the way Jax appears, stripped down and exposed, suggests something symbolic rather than mechanical, as if layers are being removed instead of data being destroyed. This sequence goes on for an unusually long time, too long for a throwaway hallucination. The show wants you to sit in it, to feel it. And then, just as suddenly, it stops. Jax is pulled back, interrupted before the process can finish. And when he returns, his eyes briefly match the color pattern of abstracted characters. Not fully abstracted, not fully safe, suspended in between. That detail is crucial because it confirms that whatever was happening wasn't metaphorical. He really was on the edge. The question is why that edge looks so different from what we were told abstraction was supposed to be. Instead of erasure, we see connection. Instead of chaos, we see transcendence. And instead of fear, for just a moment, Jax looks calm, almost relieved, which forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew. Maybe abstraction isn't the circus killing you. Maybe it's the circus losing its grip on you. If abstraction truly is an exit, then the next question becomes who controls it, and whether it's happening naturally or being interfered with. This is where Kane's role becomes impossible to ignore. From the start, Kane has insisted that he doesn't directly tamper with the minds of the players, repeatedly warning that doing so is dangerous and unstable. But at the same time, we've seen him bend that rule again and again in small, seemingly harmless ways. He erases their real names. He alters their memories just enough to keep the illusion intact. He possesses Pomni with a ghost, forces Ragatha into bizarre situations, and even rewrites Jax's behavior for the sake of a joke. All of these moments are played off as comedy, but taken together, they establish something important. Kane absolutely has the ability to mess with their minds, and he knows exactly where the line is. That makes it very interesting that abstraction has always been described as a mental failure rather than a system error. If abstraction was just caused by stress or time spent in the circus, it would be predictable, but it isn't. Instead, it seems to strike characters who are getting dangerously close to realizing something fundamental about their situation. Kinger's theory that abstraction may be the result of Kane's memory manipulation reframes everything we've seen so far. If Kane tampers with a player's mind too deeply, especially their sense of identity or purpose, it could cause a conflict the system can't resolve. And that conflict might be what we call abstraction. When Jax accuses Kane of manipulating his mind during his near-abstraction, it doesn't feel like paranoia, it feels like recognition. Jax has always been more aware than he lets on, hiding insight behind sarcasm and cruelty. His panic attacks throughout the series now take on a new meaning. They don't just look like fear, they look like resistance, moments where his mind is fighting against something being forced onto it. But what's especially important is that during Jax's most intense near-abstraction, Kane doesn't appear to be actively intervening. There's no obvious trigger, no forced adventure, no manipulation disguised as entertainment. This suggests that abstraction might be something the characters can reach on their own, especially when their desire to escape aligns with a deeper understanding of the circus itself. Jax isn't just tired or stressed in that moment, he's empty. He's lost Ribbit, he's lost Kaufmo, and unlike earlier episodes, he's no longer pretending that things will get better. That emotional state is different from panic, it's resignation. And resignation, in many philosophical and spiritual traditions, is often the final step before transformation. This ties directly into the heavy use of mythological and esoteric symbolism throughout the show. The circus is filled with imagery associated with mystery schools, particularly Gnosticism, where the material world is viewed as a prison created by a false god. Kane fits this role disturbingly well. He presents himself as a benevolent guide, but everything he offers is shallow, repetitive, and ultimately meaningless. The characters are trapped in artificial bodies, cut off from their real identities, and encouraged to accept this reality as permanent. In Gnostic belief, escape isn't achieved through obedience or distraction, but through knowledge and awakening. Once someone realizes the truth of the prison, the illusion begins to fail. If abstraction represents that moment of awakening, then Kane's fear of messing with minds makes sense. Altering memory could accidentally push someone towards realization instead of away from it. That would explain why Kane is so desperate to keep control, even to the point of subtly influencing Jax's choices later in the episode. The button scene becomes especially disturbing in this context. Jax is positioned as the deciding factor, the one who can lock everyone into the circus indefinitely. If Kane believed Jax was already close to escaping, manipulating his mind just enough to secure that outcome would serve two purposes. It would preserve Kane's world, and it would let him believe the choice was freely made. But the fact that Jax nearly abstracts before this moment suggests something slipped through Kane's control, something he didn't intend. And that makes abstraction far more than a failure state. It makes it a threat, not to the characters, but to Kane himself. To understand why abstraction feels less like destruction and more like transition, it helps to look closely at how the show visually and thematically treats Jax's experience compared to everything else we've seen in the circus. Up until this point, the digital world has always been loud, cluttered, and aggressively artificial. Bright colors, exaggerated animations, and constant noise are used to overwhelm both the characters and the audience. It's a world designed to keep you distracted. But the moment Jax enters his near-abstraction state, all of that disappears. The circus doesn't break apart, it fades away. The darkness of his room isn't threatening, it's quiet, almost womb-like, as if the noise of the world has finally been turned off. The hole in the wall isn't jagged or glitching, it's smooth, circular, and impossible, something that doesn't belong to the rules of the game. This is important because it suggests that abstraction isn't the system malfunctioning, it's the system being bypassed. When Ribbit's hand reaches through, it's not corrupted or broken, it's gentle, familiar. Ribbit doesn't pull Jax forcefully, and Jax doesn't resist. Despite the fear on his face, there's hesitation rather than terror. That hesitation feels human, not programmed. And when Jax crosses that threshold, the experience he enters doesn't resemble any in-game environment we've ever seen before. There are no textures, no defined shapes, no objectives. Instead, it feels symbolic, like a representation of consciousness itself. Jax moving through this space naked is especially telling. In storytelling, being stripped of clothing often represents vulnerability, rebirth, or the removal of false identities. In the digital circus context, where their avatars are literal masks forced on, not because Jax chose to return, but because something external interrupted him. That interruption is key. If abstraction were purely self-destructive, there would be nothing to interrupt. It would simply happen. But here, it's treated like a journey that can be cut short. And when Jax returns, he's changed. Not dramatically, not instantly, but subtly. His expression is different. His energy is heavier. He's seen something the others haven't. This ties back into another major idea the show keeps circling, the cost of awareness. Characters who start to understand the truth of the circus don't become happier. They become more distant, more unstable, more isolated. Kaufmo's obsession wasn't just with escape, it was with meaning. He couldn't reconcile the artificial joy Kane forced on them with the reality of their imprisonment. Ribbit, too, seemed deeply aware of the circus as a prison rather than a playground. Jax, for all his cruelty, has always been observant. His jokes cut deep because they're rooted in truth. That awareness may be what pushes him closest to abstraction, not stress alone, but clarity. In many stories, awakening is painful. It strips away comfort and illusion, leaving nothing but the truth. The digital circus thrives on illusion. If abstraction represents the moment when illusion can no longer sustain itself, then it isn't surprising that the system labels it as something to fear. From the system's perspective, awakening is a failure. From the prisoner's perspective, it's the beginning of freedom. And if that's the case, then Jax's near-abstraction wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. Once you start viewing abstraction as a form of awakening rather than collapse, a lot of smaller details across the series suddenly line up in ways they never did before. The show repeatedly emphasizes memory, identity, and choice, not just as narrative tools, but as weapons Kane uses to maintain control. The characters don't remember their real names, they don't remember their lives clearly. They're constantly pushed into roles, jobs, and adventures that keep them busy but never fulfilled. This isn't accidental. In psychological terms, identity is what anchors you to reality. Strip that away and people become easier to manipulate. Kane understands this instinctively, which is why he frames everything as for their own good. He doesn't need physical restraints because the prison exists in the mind. This makes abstraction especially dangerous to him because it appears to be the one thing that happens when a character's internal sense of self starts overriding the narrative Kane has built for them. That might explain why abstraction is never shown directly from the outside. We hear about it, we see its aftermath, but the experience itself is hidden, almost protected. Jax's near-abstraction is the closest we've ever gotten to seeing what's on the other side, and what we see is not corruption, but clarity. The symbolism layered into this moment reinforces that interpretation. The hand-reaching sequence strongly mirrors the imagery of creation and divine contact, where the divine reaches down to awaken humanity. But here, the roles are reversed. Ribbit, someone who has already crossed the threshold, reaches back to Jax. Knowledge is being passed sideways, not from a god, but from another prisoner who already escaped the illusion. That's a classic theme in Enlightenment narratives. Those who see the truth attempt to guide others out, even at personal risk. The kaleidoscopic visuals Jax travels through further support this idea. Kaleidoscopes break reality into patterns, showing that what you thought was solid is actually just repetition and symmetry. It's a perfect metaphor for the circus itself, which reuses the same emotional beats and forced adventures over and over. During this sequence, time feels meaningless. There's no objective, no voice guiding him, no Kane. And that absence may be the most telling part. Kane's power only exists inside the structure of the circus. The moment Jax begins to move beyond that structure, Kane vanishes. That suggests Kane doesn't just fear abstraction, he may not even be able to follow it. This brings us back to the idea that abstraction isn't caused by time, stress, or madness alone, but by a combination of emotional exhaustion and cognitive freedom. Jax doesn't want to play anymore. He doesn't want to perform. He doesn't want to pretend. And that refusal itself may be what destabilizes his avatar. The digital body can only exist as long as the mind accepts the rules of the game. When that acceptance breaks, the system